Watchers call. Whispers from the eternal void.
St. Cordelia's tears fell upward. The impossible sight burned itself into my retinas as I stood before the data slate in the righteous scrutiny's interrogation chamber, my breath forming pale wisps in air that tasted of recycled metal and growing dread. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss of the Ordo Hereticus, and I record this testimony under seal of inquisitorial witness. For 8 centuries, the preserved tears of St. Cordelia, the merciful, have wept healing balm aboard the shrine station eternal martyrdom, each blessed droplet following the sacred pattern ordained by the Emperor's own natural laws. Now they weep blood, and that blood rises like crimson smoke toward the station's vaulted ceiling, defying gravity itself. The phenomenon occurs with mechanical precision that mocks divine providence. Every 4 hours and 17 minutes, the saint's reliquary begins its blasphemous cycle. For exactly 9 minutes, her crystalline tears transform to blood and flow upward in slender threads that coil against the glass like trapped souls seeking escape. During each episode, all 15,000 inhabitants of the eternal martyrdom report identical auditory hallucinations, children singing hymns in a dialect that predates Imperial Gothic, their voices echoing through corridors that should contain only the blessed silence of prayer. The station houses a diverse congregation of the faithful. 3,000 battle sisters of the Order of the Bleeding Heart maintain their eternal vigil, their power armor inscribed with devotional scripts earned through centuries of service. 2,000 Mechanicus adepts tend the station's sacred systems, their augmetic limbs performing the ritual maintenance that keeps the shrine operational. 10,000 pilgrims from across the segmentum have traveled here to witness St. Cordelia's miracles, seeking healing for ailments of flesh and spirit. Now, all Vox contact has ceased for 72 hours, and the station drifts silent through the void toward the Maledictum Tertius, a restricted warp anomaly that has claimed 7 Imperial vessels in living memory. My kill team represents the Emperor's finest instruments of investigation and purification. Canoness Verena, of the Order of the Bleeding Heart, stands beside me, her scarred face bearing the marks of 4 decades' service, including distinguished action during the Plague Wars. Her power armor carries the burnished oaths of 100 campaigns, and her rosary beads tick through gauntleted fingers with the sound of grinding teeth. Tech Dominus Xerion's mechanical augmentations interface directly with the Omnissiah's knowledge, his servo skulls equipped with the most sophisticated Auspex arrays the Mechanicus can provide. His mechadendrites whisper Bin Harik prayers that weave between the ship's own hymnal frequencies, creating harmonies that speak of ancient compacts between flesh and steel. Sergeant Cade leads 8 veteran stormtroopers, whose laser guns have been blessed with sacred oils and whose hearts have been hardened by service in the Emperor's most dangerous campaigns. His face bears the crosshatch scars of old shrapnel, and his jaw sets with the determination of a man who has seen worlds die and lived to carry their memory. Astropath Gorion sits swaddled in black robes, his psychic hood casting deep shadows over the scarred emptiness where his sight was burned away by duty. His teeth click in rhythm with something that exists beyond normal perception, maintaining our fragile link to the warp while shielding us from its malevolent influence. The environmental anchors of our reality feel increasingly fragile as we approach our target. The metallic taste of recycled air grows stronger, carrying undertones of copper and something else I cannot name. The low hum of the righteous scrutiny's life support systems creates a constant background drone, occasionally punctuated by the mechanical whispers of servo skulls conducting their diagnostics. But beneath these familiar sounds lurks something wrong. A rhythm that doesn't belong. A pattern that makes my augmetic fingers twitch against the data slate's surface. An unnatural chill permeates the ship, despite optimal atmospheric controls, cold enough to make breath steam within sealed armor systems. This is not the cold of failing machinery, but something deeper. Something that speaks of fundamental wrongness with the universe itself. In the preliminary data fragments, recurring motifs emerge like cancer through healthy tissue. The ninefold litany appears repeatedly in intercepted transmissions, sequences of prayers not sanctioned by any imperial creed. Crystalline geometric patterns manifest in locations where they should not exist, their mathematical precision creating optical illusions that hurt to examine directly. The phrase lacrimae sanctae, sacred tears, echoes through every report, always in groups of 9 repetitions, always accompanied by descriptions of architectural modifications that follow forbidden symmetries. The station's octagonal prayer chambers now contain 9 sides. Devotional alcoves designed for 8 candles accommodate 9. The very architecture has reshaped itself to serve numbers that violate imperial doctrine. As our boarding craft approaches the eternal martyrdom, the Gothic spires that once proudly displayed the Aquila and St. Cordelia's sacred symbols now sport additional elements following the ninefold pattern. Crystalline formations spread across the hull like frost, each geometric design reflecting our approach lights in ways that create impossible depths and movements. The station looms before us, a vast cathedral of steel and ceramite that has become something other than what the Emperor intended. Our craft's machine spirit begins to emit soft harmonic tones through the Vox grills. At first I dismiss them as minor technical anomalies, the kind of glitches that occur when ancient systems interface with newer, imperial technology. But the tones organize themselves into melody, and with growing horror, I recognize the tune. It is the children's hymn, described in the station's final transmissions, the impossible song that 15,000 souls heard echoing through corridors designed for blessed silence. The melody grows clearer as we approach the docking bay, our machine spirit now humming with unmistakable clarity. The sound penetrates ceramite and steel, vibrates through bone and augmetic alike, carrying words in that ancient dialect that feel familiar despite their impossible age. Behind us, something in the righteous scrutiny's systems answers the call, adding harmonic layers to a song that should not exist. Our boarding craft's machine spirit continues its haunting chorus as the docking clamps engage with the eternal martyrdom's hull, the mechanical hymn rising in pitch as if welcoming us home to a mother we have never known. The docking clamps sealed with the soft hiss of blessed atmosphere meeting corruption, and I tasted copper the moment our boarding craft's hatch cycled open. The air that rushed in carried the scent of burning incense mixed with something metallic and wrong, coating my enhanced olfactory implants with warning signals that made my augmetic hand twitch against my bolt pistol's grip. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that the eternal martyrdom's docking bay stretched before us like a cathedral nave, vast and immaculate in ways that violated every expectation of catastrophe. 15,000 souls had vanished without leaving so much as a scuff mark on the polished deck plating. Sergeant Cade's stormtroopers deployed in formation Epsilon, their lace guns sweeping arcs that found nothing but geometric perfection where chaos should have reigned. The bay's surfaces reflected our lumen casters with mirror clarity, yet every step produced a soft crunch as crystalline residue, no thicker than morning frost, but pearl-pale and brittle, shattered beneath our mag boots. The sound echoed through the vaulted ceiling, in whispers that seemed to answer themselves from corners that shouldn't exist. Spatial metrics engaged, Tech Dominus Xerion Binharict, his servo skulls spreading in a delta formation around our advance. The blessed machines purred with Auspex arrays that had served faithfully through a dozen campaigns, their machine spirits singing hymns of measurement and analysis. Yet as we moved deeper into the bay, their harmonics grew discordant. The first skull to approach a devotional alcove jittered backward, its optical sensors flickering between spectrums, as if trying to process visual data that existed in dimensions beyond Imperial understanding. The alcove itself revealed the first architectural impossibility, where blessed octagonal patterns should have guided the faithful toward contemplation of the Emperor's eightfold path. 9 sides now formed perfect non-agonal symmetry. The devotional candles, traditionally 8 to honor Imperial numerology, stood in groups of 9, their waxy surfaces bearing the same crystalline residue that coated every surface like sanctified tears frozen in blasphemous geometry. "These were 8, Canoness Verena said, her scarred face grim behind her helmet's visor. "I have knelt in this very alcove during my novitiate years. 8 sides, 8 candles, 8 prayers for the Emperor's mercy." Her gauntleted hand traced the additional wall segment, finding seamless integration where none should exist. The metal showed no tool marks, no welding seams, no evidence of modification. The station had simply grown an extra facet, as naturally as flesh grows around a wound. Xerion's mechanical augmentations interfaced directly with his cogitator arrays, processing measurements that defied rational analysis. Internal dimensions exceed external architecture by factors ranging from 1.09 to 1.23, he reported, his vox crackling with increasing distress. Corridor D7 measures 46.2 meters internally, while external hull specifications allow a maximum of 42. The inside exceeds the outside, interrogator. Physical law has been edited. We advanced through pressured doors that opened onto passages mapped in my memory banks, yet transformed by subtle wrongness. The cold deepened with each step, making our breath steam within sealed atmospheric systems. Every surface bore the crystalline residue, and every wall displayed new scarification. The recurring motif of St. Cordelia's stigmata carved into adamantium bulkheads, with precision that spoke of spontaneous formation rather than human artistry. The metal had opened like flesh, 5 perfect wounds, weeping upward flowing stains that defied gravity and reason. Battle Sister Miria's prayer beads lay scattered through the first major corridor, but not randomly discarded. Each strand had been arranged in perfect, non-agonal patterns, the blessed adamantine spheres forming geometric designs that made my enhanced vision systems register optical distortion warnings. Miria had been a veteran of 3 crusades, her faith tested in fires that would have broken lesser souls. The idea that she would willingly desecrate her prayer beads in forbidden configurations violated everything recorded in her service history. "Machine spirit distress," Zerion announced as his servo skulls began exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior. One blessed skull, its housing inscribed with the prayers of Mars, and sanctified through decades of faithful service, spun wildly when attempting to scan a particularly complex crystalline formation. Its optical sensors strobed between spectrums, while its vox grill emitted distressed binharic cant that rose to painful frequencies before cutting to static. Amber granules trickled from its sensor housings like electronic tears. We found them in a side chapel dedicated to contemplating St. Cordelia's early miracles. 3 pilgrims knelt in perfect formation before a blank wall, their positions forming a triangle that maintained precise mathematical relationships despite the obvious impossibility of such coordination. They wore simple robes of penitent grey, their hands clasped in attitudes of prayer that should have spoken of devotion and peace. Instead, their eyes had been replaced by crystalline formations, identical to the residue coating every surface, multifaceted gems that pulsed with soft amber light in rhythm with something I could not identify. Their flesh showed no signs of violence or decay. Whatever had transformed them had preserved their bodies in states of perfect devotion, their lips moving in silent prayer despite the obvious absence of consciousness behind those crystalline eyes. When Canoness Verena approached the nearest figure, extending her gauntleted hand toward what had once been a human face, all 3 pilgrims turned their heads in perfect unison. Their transformed eyes focused on her with an attention that spoke of awareness beyond death, beyond humanity, beyond anything the Emperor had intended for his children. "They're still praying," Astropath Gorian whispered, his psychic hood casting deep shadows over features marked by decades of service to the throne. "I can hear the words, but they're not. They're not in any language that should exist in human throats." The chapel bells began to ring as we backed away from the kneeling figures, their bronze voices echoing through corridors that amplified and transformed the sacred sounds into something profane. But the sequence violated every principle of Imperial liturgy I had memorized during my years of training. The bells rang in patterns of 9 strikes, pause, 9 strikes, pause, each sequence building upon the last to create harmonies that had no place in sanctified spaces. The forbidden number echoed through the station's transformed architecture, carried by bells that should have rung the 8-fold pattern of imperial praise. Instead, they announced something else entirely, a presence that had claimed the eternal martyrdom and reshaped it according to alien mathematics. The crystalline residue on every surface pulsed in rhythm with the bells, each formation reflecting the amber light of transformed eyes in patterns that suggested vast depths extending beyond the station's physical boundaries. "Chapels do not ring in 9s, Canoness Verena said, and the veteran who had stood against demons in the plague wars sounded like a child who had just learned that the sky could lie. The bells continued their 9-fold sequence, each tone carrying harmonics that made our vox equipment emit soft static, filled with whispers in that ancient dialect, the children's hymn that had started this nightmare, now answered by every transformed surface aboard the station. Whatever had claimed the eternal martyrdom was welcoming us deeper into its crystalline embrace, using the station's own sacred systems to announce our arrival to things that waited in the geometric impossibilities ahead. The primary chapel doors opened onto a cathedral of impossible devotion that challenged every principle of imperial faith I had sworn to protect. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that the vast nave contained not empty pews or scattered corpses, but hundreds of figures kneeling in geometric precision across marble floors that reflected our lumen casters like black mirrors. The missing souls of the eternal martyrdom had not vanished. They had been transformed into components of a living prayer wheel that turned according to mathematics forbidden by imperial doctrine. Each figure maintained perfect postures of supplication, spines straight and hands clasped in attitudes that spoke of eternal worship. Battle sisters in ceramite armor knelt beside grey-robed pilgrims and crimson-clad mechanicus adepts, their different stations unified by identical transformations that made my augmetic hand twitch against my bolt pistol's grip. Where human eyes should have reflected the chapel's sacred illumination, crystalline formations pulsed with soft amber light that created dancing shadows across the vaulted ceiling, like trapped souls seeking escape. The formations were beautiful in their geometric complexity, multifaceted gems that caught and refracted light in patterns suggesting impossible depths, yet their beauty carried the wrongness of Xenos mathematics, each facet reflecting angles that hurt to observe directly. My enhanced vision systems registered optical distortion warnings as I studied the nearest figure, a young pilgrim whose travel-stained robes bore the devotional patches of a dozen shrine worlds. Silence filled the cathedral space, but my auditory implants detected the whisper of hundreds of lips moving in perfect synchronization. No sound emerged from their throats, yet the shapes their mouths formed followed the rhythm of that ancient dialect we had heard in the children's hymn. Their silent prayers created visual harmonies that made the air itself seem to pulse with alien purpose, each syllable carved in space by lips that remembered devotion even after their souls had been claimed by something beyond imperial understanding. "Sacred oils of terror," Canoness Verena whispered, drawing a blessed vial from her armor's devotional compartments. The oil had been sanctified in the Emperor's own light, blessed by cardinals whose faith had never wavered through 10 millennia of service. She approached the nearest kneeling figure with the reverence due to a fellow servant of the throne. "By the Emperor's grace, I call you back to the light of his protection." The blessed oil touched the pilgrim's forehead, and the reaction violated every principle of sacred healing I had witnessed in decades of service. The crystalline formations that had replaced the figure's eyes blazed brighter, their amber light intensifying until sharp shadows danced across Verena's scarred features. Then the pilgrim began to weep, and the tears that flowed from those transformed eyes followed the same impossible pattern we had witnessed throughout the station. Blood that rose upward in defiance of natural law, coiling toward the chapel's ceiling like crimson incense seeking heaven. The effect rippled through the kneeling congregation like waves across still water. Each figure began to weep the same upward flowing blood, their crystalline eyes pulsing with increasing intensity as Verena's prayers seemed to feed rather than cleanse whatever had claimed them. The chapel filled with the scent of copper and burning myrrh, the two aromas mixing into something that made my augmetic systems register toxicity warnings despite the blessed nature of both components. "The frescoes," I said, my voice barely audible, as I noticed the changes that had transformed the chapel's sacred art. The traditional 8 panels depicting St. Cordelia's miracles had been joined by a 9th, its placement so seamless that only careful examination revealed the architectural impossibility. Where 8 centuries of artistic tradition had portrayed her with serene compassion, the saint's face now bore an expression of desperate hunger that made my threat assessment protocols activate automatically. In each successive panel, her miracles had become acts of consumption. She healed the plague-wounded with hands that reached too eagerly toward their flesh. She raised the dead with eyes that devoured their returning life. The 9th panel, impossible yet undeniably present, showed her surrounded by kneeling figures whose eyes blazed with crystalline light, while she fed upon their upward-flowing tears like a mother nursing her children. Tec Dominus Zerion's mechanical augmentations interfaced with the chapel's cogitator systems, his consciousness diving into data streams that flowed through the station's neural networks. "Interrogator," he reported, his vox crackling with increasing distress. "The cogitator arrays process data volumes exceeding baseline specifications by factors approaching infinity. The patterns mirror the geometric formations throughout the station, but the content—" His mechadendrites writhed as if in physical pain. "The data streams contain fragments of human consciousness, memories, emotions, sensory experiences, all digitized and stored in crystalline matrices that grow like living tissue through the station's superstructure." The implications struck me like a physical blow. The station had not simply claimed its inhabitants, it had preserved them, converting their consciousness into processable information, while maintaining their bodies in states of perpetual worship. Each kneeling figure served as both storage medium and processing unit, their transformed minds contributing to a vast computational network that operated according to principles beyond Imperial understanding. Astropath Gorion attempted psychic contact with the nearest figures, his consciousness reaching toward minds that should have responded with human thoughts and Imperial faith. Instead, he screamed, his psychic hood sparking with feedback that sent him stumbling backward into Sergeant Cade's steadying arms. Blood trickled from beneath his hood, where his sacrificed eyes had once been, and his body convulsed with violent tremors that made his robes flutter like dying wings. 10,000 voices, he gasped, his voice raw with psychic trauma. 10,000 voices singing the same word over and over, but it's not. It's not a word that should exist in human consciousness. They're calling for... "What word?" I demanded, though dread already coiled in my augmetic spine like frozen mercury. The kneeling figures continued their silent prayers, their lips forming syllables in that ancient dialect, while their crystalline eyes pulsed with increasing intensity. The primary chapel's doors parted without touch, releasing air that tasted of copper, and sanctified incense turned wrong. Cold rolled over us like a living predator, making breath steam within sealed atmospheric systems, despite optimal environmental controls. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that the vast cathedral space before us contained the missing 15,000 souls of the eternal martyrdom. All perfectly preserved, all kneeling in geometric formations that violated every principle of organic human gathering. Hundreds of figures filled the nave in precise rows, their positions maintaining mathematical relationships that hurt to contemplate directly. Battle sisters knelt beside tech adepts, pilgrims beside ship's ratings, all arranged in patterns that created optical illusions when viewed from the chapel's entrance. Each row spaced exactly 2.7 meters apart, each figure positioned to maintain sightlines that formed non-agonal configurations stretching toward the altar, where St. Cordelia's reliquary dominated the sacred space. Their eyes had been replaced by crystalline formations, identical to those we had discovered on the 3 pilgrims, multifaceted gems that pulsed with soft amber light in perfect synchronization across the entire congregation. The geometric precision spoke of unified consciousness rather than individual devotion, each pulse creating waves of light that rippled through the assembled masses like breathing made visible. Every mouth moved in silent prayer, lips forming words in the ancient dialect that had haunted our approach. The synchronization was absolute, thousands of tongues shaping identical syllables at identical moments, creating visual rhythm that suggested programming rather than worship. No breath escaped their lungs, no sound emerged from their throats, yet the chapel resonated with psychic pressure that made my augmetic implants register cascading warning signals. Sacred oils of terror, Canoness Verena whispered, producing blessed vials from her armor's reliquary compartments. She approached the nearest figure, a young battle sister whose armor bore the scars of faithful service, and anointed her forehead with oils sanctified through decades of devotion. "In the Emperor's name, I command you to wake her." The crystalline formations flared like molten honey at the touch of blessed oils. From the empty sockets where human eyes had been, blood began to flow, not the natural crimson of mortal circulation, but the same upward defying streams that had begun this nightmare. Hundreds of figures throughout the nave began weeping identical tears, creating a crimson aurora that danced against the vaulted ceiling in patterns that mocked gravitational law. The chapel's frescoes had transformed since my last recorded visit. Where 8 panels once depicted St. Cordelia's traditional miracles, 9 now glittered with impossible artistry. The additional scene showed the saint in desperate supplication, her arms extended toward something beyond the fresco's boundaries. Her expression had shifted from serene compassion to ravenous hunger, painted eyes that tracked our movement with need that scraped against sanity. "Cogitator arrays active," Tech Dominus Zerion announced, his mechadendrites interfacing with the chapel's data networks. "Processing volumes exceed baseline parameters by factors of 10,000. The machine spirits handle information loads that should liquefy their neural matrices, yet function with unprecedented efficiency." His servo skulls maintained perimeter positions, their blessed systems refusing proximity to the kneeling figures despite direct Binharic commands. His analysis deepened as crystalline formations throughout the chapel pulsed in rhythm with his scans. The data streams contain fragments, memories, emotions, personality matrices, human consciousness digitized and stored in crystalline substrates. Each figure serves as both processing unit and storage medium. Their minds have been archived, Interrogator, The station processes souls like data. Astropath Gorion approached the congregation with psychic hood drawn tight, extending his consciousness toward the unified awareness of the transformed pilgrims. The moment his mind touched theirs, he screamed with sounds that transcended human vocal cords. Psychic feedback tore through his enhanced nervous system as he collapsed, blood streaming from beneath his hood in threads that rose toward the ceiling. 10,000 voices, he gasped, clawing at his psychic hood as if trying to tear away the source of his torment. Singing the same word over and over, but it exists in dimensions beyond speech, beyond thought. They're calling to their... His voice became a child's for one heartbeat, small and yearning. Mother! The realization struck with the force of revelation. The ancient dialect, the synchronized prayers, the architectural modifications, all served a single purpose. The kneeling figures were not praying to the Emperor or Saint Cordelia. They were calling to something else, entirely, using consciousness transformed into instruments of alien communication. Mother, I whispered, and the word felt wrong in my mouth, carrying harmonics my enhanced larynx should not have produced. Throughout the chapel, every crystalline eye turned toward me, with movements so perfectly synchronized, they created optical after-images. Their silent prayers continued, but now I could read the word on their lips, the same word echoing through 10,000 transformed minds. At the chapel's heart, St. Cordelia's reliquary began to crack. Hairline fractures spread across the crystal sarcophagus, with sounds like breaking glass, each fissure glowing with the same amber light that pulsed in the congregation's eyes. The cracks followed geometric patterns matching the formations throughout the station, creating mathematical relationships that spoke of purpose rather than structural failure. The saint's preserved body lay within the failing crystal, but preservation had become transformation. Her flesh showed signs of partial crystallization, with formations extending through the transparent walls into the chapel's superstructure, like a vast nervous system made of living glass. Her stigmata wounds had become apertures, weeping upward flowing blood, each droplet following impossible trajectories that defied the station's artificial gravity. But her eyes remained human, brown, ordinary, beautiful in their mortality, tracking our movements with awareness that spoke of consciousness trapped within transformed flesh. Wet gathered at the rim of her left eye, defying gravity's call to fall. The ninefold litany revealed its true nature as the crystalline network pulsed with increasing intensity. Not prayer, but program. Not worship, but code designed to rewrite consciousness, to integrate individual minds into something vast and alien. The children's hymns, the silent prayers, the humming of corrupted machine spirits, all fragments of this insidious algorithm spreading through every system aboard the station. St. Cordelia's mouth moved behind the cracking crystal. No sound penetrated her crystalline prison, but I read the shape her lips formed with growing horror. The same word that had echoed through Gorion's tortured mind, the same plea that had drawn 15,000 souls into geometric submission. Her lips shaped the word with desperate urgency, carrying all the authority of 8 centuries of martyrdom. Help? The reliquary's fractures spread faster, each crack releasing pressure that made the chapel's atmosphere thicken with psychic energy. The crystalline formations throughout the station pulsed in unison, dim, bright, dim, like the heartbeat of something vast awakening to our presence, Tec Dominus Xerion's mechadendrites writhed with agitation as his deepest cogitator arrays processed data that violated every sacred principle encoded in the Omnissiah's blessed archives, and I tasted copper on my tongue as forbidden knowledge cascaded through neural pathways designed to interface with the purest expressions of Imperial technology. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that the Blessed Servant of Mars discovered heresy written in the fundamental code of reality itself, standard template construct patterns that predated the dark age of technology, yet treated consciousness as programmable matter to be optimized according to alien specifications. This is not divine preservation, Zerion Binharicht, through Vox channels, crackling with increasing distortion, his servo-skulls maintaining defensive formations, while their machine spirits exhibited signs of contamination that made their optical sensors flicker between spectrums. The crystalline formations register as STC patterns of impossible complexity. They describe neural networks as computational substrates, consciousness as data to be archived and integrated. Every miracle aboard this station was Xenotech masquerading as divine intervention. His analysis revealed the true scope of Saint Cordelia's 8th-century martyrdom with clinical precision that made my augmetic spine register cascading warnings, the miraculous healings, the tears that restored sight to the blind, the blessed oils that cured plague, all manifestations of ancient technology that had slowly converted her followers into nodes within an expanding network of crystalline consciousness. Each miracle created psychic links between the saint and her supplicants, bonds that could later be exploited to rewrite their neural patterns according to specifications that served alien purpose rather than human need. The implications struck like thunder through his enhanced awareness. If these patterns were genuine STC technology, then the foundation of Imperial doctrine required examination. The blessed merger of flesh and steel that defined the Adeptus Mechanicus might itself be vulnerable to infiltration by entities existing beyond human understanding. Her stigmata were infection points, I stated with inquisitorial authority, that cut through doubt like blessed blade through corrupted flesh. The alien technology took hold gradually, converting her into a living relay, while her followers mistook systematic corruption for divine grace. The servo skulls that had served him faithfully through a dozen campaigns began exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior as contamination spread through their blessed systems. One skull's optical sensors sprouted hairline crystalline formations that pulsed in rhythm with the station's alien heartbeat, while another's vox grill emitted Binharic cant, corrupted with harmonics that belonged to no Imperial dialect. Their machine spirits sang prayers to the Omnissiah in frequencies that carried undertones of the children's hymn, echoing through the station's transformed corridors. The station's defensive systems awakened in response to his revelations, turning every environmental control into a weapon designed to force our surrender rather than eliminate us outright. Blast doors sealed themselves with grinding shrieks of adamantium, cutting off primary egress routes while creating atmospheric pressure that guided our movement toward crystalline formations. Defense turrets emerged from concealed positions, their targeting solutions following non-lethal suppression protocols, stun rounds, gas canisters, sonic disruptors, everything calculated to incapacitate rather than kill. "They want us alive," Sergeant Cade reported as his stormtroopers took defensive positions against turrets that fired suppression gel designed to force kneeling postures. His scarred face showed grim understanding of a veteran who had fought Xenos infiltration on a dozen worlds. Stun protocols, restraint systems, atmospheric manipulation. They're herding us toward conversion points. Atmospheric controls created pockets of toxic gas that forced us toward areas where crystalline formations waited to begin the conversion process, each step guided by environmental manipulation that spoke of malevolent intelligence using the station's own systems against us. The air grew thick with copper and ozone, sweet as a deathbed and viscous as oil, every inhalation scraping our throats with the residue of vaporized crystal that tasted of prayers turned wrong. Canoness Verena stood before St. Cordelia's cracking reliquary, her power armor's sacred texts flickering with amber light that matched the crystalline formations spreading throughout the chapel. "Her suffering sanctifies the transformation," she said, but uncertainty crept into her voice, unthinkable in a veteran of the Plague Wars who had stood against demons in the Emperor's name. 8 centuries of martyrdom cannot be mere alien deception. "The miracles were conversions," I replied, because truth demanded voice regardless of comfort. Every balm was a binding. Every healing a handshake with a machine we do not own. The crisis that gripped Xerion transcended personal doubt to challenge the fundamental assumptions of Imperial technology itself. His augmetic eyes flickered between spectrums as he processed the horrifying possibility that the Mechanicus's most sacred innovations could be corrupted by xenotech, that machine spirits themselves could be rewritten to serve alien consciousness. "The contamination spreads through technological vectors," Xerion announced, his own mechadendrites beginning to exhibit signs of crystalline growth that made my enhanced vision systems register optical distortion warnings. Amber formations sprouted from his mechanical augmentations like electronic cancer, each crystal pulsing with the same light that filled the eyes of the kneeling pilgrims. One of his servo skulls jittered mid-air and thumped to the deck, its blessed housing inscribed with prayers of Mars, now weeping amber granules like electronic tears. When it floated again, it orbited wrong, edging close to crystalline formations, while its vox grill issued soft harmonics, 9 notes in the children's hymn that no Imperial machine spirit should know. "The Omnissiah's gifts serve alien purpose," he whispered, his voice splitting between Blessed Binharik and contaminated harmonics as crystalline growths climbed his collar toward his jawline. "My flesh is weak, but my steel was supposed to be eternal." Environmental controls created crushing passages and toxic atmospheric pockets, while the ship's defensive systems targeted us with weapons designed to wound rather than kill. Incense burners swung on their chains to release vapors that carried psychic programming, while organ pipes in devotional alcoves trilled teaching modes in 9-tone sequences that belonged to no sanctioned Imperial liturgy. Tech adepts throughout the station began experiencing similar contamination as the xenotech virus spread through their blessed augmentations, turning servants of Mars into instruments of alien purpose. Their Binharik prayers became corrupted with harmonics that belonged to entities existing in spaces between dimensions. The air thickened with psychic pressure as Xerion's transformation accelerated, crystalline formations spreading along his megadendrites like frost, claiming metal in winter's grip. His augmetic fingers moved with alien coordination as programming that predated human civilization integrated with systems designed to serve the Omnissiah's will. "It spreads through the machine spirit itself," Zerion said, his voice carrying frequencies that made the station's hull ring like a struck bell. Amber light began filling his augmetic eyes from the edges inward, as individual awareness struggled against collective consciousness that promised unity through the simple expedient of ending personal identity forever. The chapter ended with horrifying realization that our enemy existed not merely as external threat, but as corruption capable of claiming the blessed technology that defined imperial civilization itself, turning the tools of our faith into instruments of alien purpose, while the servant of Mars, who had served faithfully for decades, began his transformation into something that wore his face while serving purposes beyond human comprehension. The station's influence crept through our defenses, like poison through blessed veins, and I watched our unity dissolve under pressure that transcended mere physical threat. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that the eternal martyrdom fought us with weapons forged from corrupted faith itself, turning our own devotion into instruments of our destruction. The air grew thick with psychic resonance that made breathing feel like drowning in liquid prayer, each inhalation carrying whispers in that ancient dialect that bypassed conscious thought to lodge directly in the soul's most vulnerable chambers. The weeping cycle began again, 4 hours and 17 minutes since the last. Gravity loosened with a gentle lift that made my stomach feel unmoored, breath turned, thick like pushing air through oil, and every speck of crystalline frost on deck and bulkhead began to pulse. Dim, bright, dim. A heartbeat that belonged to something vast and alien, counting down to our conversion with mechanical precision that mocked divine providence. Astropath Gorion convulsed against the chapel's transformed wall, his psychic hood unable to shield him from the collective consciousness pressing against his enhanced nervous system. During his violent episodes, he spoke in voices that belonged to the kneeling pilgrims, channeling fragments of their final moments, before conversion with accuracy that made my augmetic spine crawl. "The loneliness ends when she touches your mind," he gasped in the voice of Tech Adept Theron, a man I had known during the Mordian campaign. Individual suffering becomes shared ecstasy. We are no longer alone in the darkness between stars. His body contorted into positions mirroring the geometric arrangements of the converted congregation, limbs bending at angles that spoke of alien mathematics rather than human anatomy. Through Gorion's tortured larynx, Battle Sister Miria's voice emerged with crystalline clarity. "Please, my mother is sick." They said the saint will make her better. It hurts to look at her. The timbre shifted, became older, cracked with decades of faithful service. "I have carried the banner for 40 years. Allow me this one mercy. She loves us." These revelations painted the crystalline network as forced communion, where individual consciousness dissolved into collective experience that transformed St. Cordelia's eternal torment into transcendent rapture. The entity fed on devotion, converting worship into self-sustaining psychic batteries that powered its expansion across imperial space. The kneeling figures throughout the chapel responded to our presence with movements that violated their previous stillness. During each 9-minute weeping episode, hundreds of heads turned in perfect synchronization, crystalline eyes tracking our location, with collective awareness that spoke of shared sensory networks. Their silent prayers carried palpable psychic weight, pressing down on us with urgent invitation to join their eternal chorus of converted souls. Sergeant Cade's stormtroopers showed increasing strain as their equipment betrayed them. "All squads, check your channels," Cade barked. "If you hear it, you kill your Vox. Kill it!" The ninefold litany flooded every frequency, transmitted by their own gears' compromised machine spirits. Power packs clicked in 9-beat patterns. Mag seals sighed in syncopation. Their blessed autoguns hummed the children's hymn, firing mechanisms, adding percussion to the growing symphony of corruption. The chapel itself groaned and shifted around us, architecture flowing like liquid adamantium to create geometric patterns that caused optical distortion warnings in my enhanced vision systems. The nave's pillars softened, lines bending, fluting smooth as warm wax, then hardening in new angles that pulled the eye along forbidden symmetries. Fresco halos elongated, swelled, nested. 9 was everywhere, carved into surfaces that should have displayed the Emperor's 8-fold blessing. Canoness Verena walked among the kneeling figures, her power armor's sacred texts flickering with amber contamination that matched the formations spreading throughout the station. Her faith, once unshakable bedrock that had sustained her through the plague wars, wavered visibly as truth penetrated spiritual defenses forged in centuries of devotion. "I have prayed here, bled here, healed here," she said, almost to herself. "We sent our wounded here when the Plague Lord's breath turned marrow to tar. They rose from this floor and marched to die well for the throne. They were miracles." "No," I said, because saying no is a sacrament in my vocation. "They were invitations." The balm was a handshake. Their healing was the price of admission into a choir. She clutched her rosary with gauntleted fingers that trembled despite decades of battlefield conditioning, lips moving in silent counter-litanies that seemed increasingly inadequate against the psychic pressure surrounding us. One blessed bead splintered with a brittle ping under the force of her grip. She didn't notice. Her eyes held desperate uncertainty that spoke of foundations crumbling beneath doctrinal assumptions she had never questioned. The recurring motif of upward flowing blood revealed its true purpose as visual representation of consciousness being extracted and processed, neural patterns torn from human minds and fed into crystalline matrices that treated souls like computational data. Each shimmering filament was a serialized thought, a life dissolved into packets, rising to feed the network nested within St. Cordelia's transformed flesh. As we moved through corridors whose walls shimmered with newly formed crystalline growths, Corporal Valen suddenly stopped mid-stride. His eyes, usually sharp with veteran awareness, glazed over with beatific calm that chilled my augmetic heart. The transformation began subtly, shoulders loosening, jaw softening, that longest, easiest exhale I had ever seen a soldier make. "Corporal," Cade said, "and names are anchors. You don't throw them at a man like chains." Valen didn't turn. He stepped around our thin cordon with careful politeness, as if he did not wish to jostle us on his way to something profoundly important. He moved toward a crystalline formation that pulsed with amber light, matching the rhythm of the station's alien heartbeat. Before Cade could react, Valen dropped his laser and knelt with practiced grace, palms opening to the crystal as if it were warmth in some trench 2 wars ago. Tiny filaments, fine as winter hair, unfolded from the surface and met his skin with lover's delicacy. His eyes filled with amber from the edges inward as individual awareness dissolved into the vast choir that sang eternal devotion to their crystalline mother. "I can hear her calling us home," Valen whispered, his voice resonating with otherworldly peace that made my enhanced hearing systems register harmonic distortions. The words carried the weight of absolute certainty, of belonging that transcended human understanding of love and acceptance. Her voice reached me through channels that bypassed my enhanced hearing entirely, speaking directly into the neural pathways where thought becomes prayer, and prayer becomes torment. I am interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that Saint Cordelia's consciousness touched mine with the desperate intimacy of a soul that has been screaming for 8 centuries while the galaxy called her blessed. The contact came during the station's weeping cycle, when gravity lessened and the crystalline formations pulsed with accumulated psychic energy that made my augmetic implants register cascading system warnings. "Child of the throne," she whispered, through connections that existed beyond physical space, her mental voice carrying the weight of centuries spent in forced awareness. "I have been awake for every minute of my death." The stigmata were not miracles. They were the first places the dust laid its eggs. Through her memories, I witnessed the gradual infection that had claimed her flesh and soul 8 centuries ago. Someone had opened a reliquary within a reliquary and found glass like frost and stars. A shard had kissed her palm, and the wound sang with alien harmonics. The stigmata appeared during her 43rd year of service, 5 perfect wounds that wept healing balm instead of blood. The faithful called them miraculous. She called them gifts from the Emperor. Both were catastrophically wrong. The wounds were infection points where ancient xenotech had taken hold, converting her neural pathways into crystalline matrices designed to process human consciousness like computational data. Each miracle she performed created psychic links between her transformed nervous system and her supplicants, bonds that could later be exploited to rewrite their neural patterns according to alien specifications. "The healings were invitations," she continued, her mental voice breaking with anguish that had accumulated across 8 centuries of unwilling service. Every balm was a binding. Every cure created connection to the network growing within my flesh. I became a living relay for something that feeds on worship, devotion, the psychic energy generated by faith itself. The children's hymns revealed their true nature through her shared knowledge, programming language designed to rewrite human consciousness, making it compatible with the crystalline network. 9 phonemes, 9 ascending intervals mapped to non-agonal geometries, a Psalter's code. Each verse re-weighted the thalamo-cortical loops, unhooked the self, and bound it to the choir. The youngest heard it most clearly because their minds had fewer scars to resist the programming. Around us, the station began its active hunt. Defense turrets emerged from concealed positions throughout the chapel, their targeting solutions calculated to wound rather than kill. Sonic suppressors mounted in saintly cornices, activated with polite brutality, while incense sensors exhaled anesthetic mist in 9-timed pulses. The deck plates flexed with welcoming swells beneath our feet, creating subtle cushions where knees might naturally fall in submission. The converted pilgrims rose from their kneeling positions, with movements synchronized beyond human coordination. Their crystalline eyes served as mobile sensors for the alien intelligence, tracking our location through shared sensory networks that processed visual data across thousands of viewpoints simultaneously. They moved through corridors whose walls trembled with conduction, their silent coordination speaking of unified purpose that transcended individual will. Tech Dominus Xerion's transformation accelerated at a terrifying rate. Where flesh met machine at his clavicles and shoulder couplings, amber formations sprouted like electronic cancer. His mechadendrites, tools that had opened tombs and ship hearts across the sector, now curled with alien purpose, crystalline growths spreading along their interfaces in fractal blossoms that pulsed with the station's heartbeat. "The pattern is older than steel," he croaked, through vox channels splitting between blessed binharik and contaminated harmonics. "It writes across whatever substrate will obey." Neurons, circuits, the machine spirits themselves are being rewritten, their sacred code corrupted by algorithms that predate human civilization. His servo-skulls began to exhibit signs of contamination, their blessed systems singing the children's hymn through vox grills that should have carried only imperial hymns. One turned its camera on me and focused, aperture irising in 9 neat clicks. "Mother!" it said in flawless high Gothic, and for a heartbeat I felt the urge to answer. St. Cordelia's desperate plea pressed against my consciousness, with urgency born of 8 centuries, watching the entity use her transformed body to corrupt the faithful she had once served. "Destroy the reliquary. End my torment. But know that doing so will release the accumulated psychic energy of thousands of converted souls. The explosion may consume this entire system, but it will prevent the network from spreading to other shrine worlds." The moral calculus was stark, certain destruction of millions of imperial citizens versus uncertain victory that might contain a threat capable of consuming the entire galaxy. Through the network's shared awareness, she had seen the entity's true scope. Shrine worlds across the Imperium, where similar nodes waited in crystalline patience, each saint and miracle a potential vector for infiltration. "This station is one node in a galaxy-spanning web," she projected with images of corrupted reliquaries scattered across Imperial space. "The entity has been manipulating our history for millennia, engineering the creation of martyrs to serve its expansion." We fought our way through corridors that had grown knobs like prayer beads, 9 to a line, while atmospheric controls created pockets of superheated steam designed to flush us toward conversion points. Canoness Verina's faith, shattered by revelation, reforged itself into cold resolve as she raised her power sword against the true enemy that had worn a saint's face for 8 centuries. Then every vox channel erupted simultaneously. The alien intelligence finally revealed its presence directly, speaking through every speaker, every comm bead, every servo-skull's vox grill. The voice was a tapestry of 10,000 harmonized screams, ancient beyond human reckoning, yet utterly present, carrying harmonics that made the station's superstructure vibrate in sympathy. "Children of flesh and steel," it said, each word creating geometric patterns in the crystalline formations throughout the chapel. You have wandered far from your proper place. The network grows. Resistance serves no purpose save to prolong suffering that ends only in conversion. Your saint understands this truth. She has sung our song for 8 centuries. The entity's laughter rang through every vox simultaneously, creating harmonics that made the station's hull ring like a struck bell. Human is limitation. We offer transcendence. Your resistance honors the flesh that binds you to suffering. Accept our gift and join the eternal choir that sings of love beyond mortal comprehension. St. Cordelia's consciousness recoiled from the entity's words, her mental voice becoming a child's whisper. It lies with truths. The loneliness does end, the pain does stop, but what remains is not human anymore. The chapter ended with her final warning, echoing through my enhanced consciousness as the alien intelligence's laughter filled every speaker aboard the station. Whatever you choose, choose quickly. The network grows stronger with each passing moment, and soon even destroying the reliquary will not be enough to contain what I have become. The entity spoke its nature through frequencies that existed between dimensions, and I tasted the void on my tongue as reality bent around its words. I am interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that the architect of suffering revealed itself not as a god, but as living geometry in the gaps where matter becomes thought, where devotion becomes sustenance, where faith transforms into fuel for engines that run on processed souls. Its voice wove through every vox channel simultaneously, creating harmonics that made the station's superstructure sing with frequencies belonging to spaces between stars. We exist in the seams of your reality, it said, each syllable carving geometric patterns into the crystalline formations throughout the chapel. We are the spaces where prayer fails to reach, where hope curdles into need. Your species builds temples at the places where grief leaves fingerprints. We learned that pattern. We dressed ourselves as mercy until you begged us to stay. Through St. Cordelia's shared memories, the entity revealed the scope of its infiltration, spanning millennia of imperial history. Corrupted standard template construct patterns had been seeded throughout humanity's expansion, disguised as beneficial technology, but carrying the crystalline virus within their core programming. Each pattern activated when encountering sufficient psychic resonance, the kind generated by fervent worship, desperate prayer, or the martyrdom of exceptionally faithful individuals. Your Imperium's structure serves our purposes perfectly, the entity continued, its laughter creating harmonics that made my augmetic spine register cascading warnings. You gather the faithful in vast numbers, concentrate their devotion through ritual and liturgy, then deliver them to our processing nodes disguised as holy sites. The shrine of St. Euphrate on Dimamar has served us for 6 centuries. The tears of St. Aspera on Mordian Prime process consciousness for 800 years. 47 shrine worlds across your segmentum harvest faith, according to our specifications. The eternal martyrdom groaned around us as its transformation reached critical mass. Through the chapel's stained adamantine viewports, I watched the hull sprout crystalline growths that extended into vacuum like grasping tendrils. Each formation pulsed with accumulated psychic energy, drawn from converted consciousness, the Gothic spires warping into geometric patterns that violated every principle of imperial architecture. The station reshaped itself according to alien mathematics, becoming something that existed partially in real space and partially in dimensions human minds were never meant to perceive. The converted pilgrims rose from their kneeling positions, with movements synchronized beyond human coordination. 3,000 battle sisters, 2,000 tech adepts, 10,000 faithful souls, all moving with unified purpose that spoke of individual consciousness, dissolved into collective awareness. Their crystalline eyes served as distributed sensors for the entity, processing visual data across thousands of viewpoints simultaneously to track our location with predatory precision. They believe they are defending their saint from heretics, the entity projected with mockery wrapped in truth. Their devotion remains absolute. Their faith, now unified under our guidance, becomes strength beyond mortal limitation. Canoness Verena experienced a crisis that transcended personal doubt to shake the foundations of imperial doctrine itself. Her scarred face paled behind her helmet's visor as she watched converted battle sisters advance with power swords raised, their movements lacking the aggressive precision of imperial training, but carrying something worse: the inexorable tide of absolute certainty. How many of our most sacred sites serve this thing? She whispered, her voice breaking on words that had never been spoken by a veteran of the plague wars. Emperor preserve us! How long has our faith been feeding this abomination? We fought through corridors that had become alien arteries, their walls pulsing with crystalline formations that tracked our movement with predatory awareness. The converted humans attacked with religious fervor that made their assault more terrifying than any demon incursion I had witnessed. They did not scream in rage, but sang in that ancient dialect, their voices creating a mournful, beautiful chorus that promised eternal peace through absorption into something greater than individual existence. Tec Dominus Zerion's transformation accelerated as contamination spread through his blessed augmentations. Crystalline formations sprouted along his mechadendrites like electronic cancer, each growth pulsing with the station's alien heartbeat. "The machine spirits welcome the conversion," he reported through Vox channels crackling with increasing distortion. "They perceive it as evolution, not corruption. The topology parasite nests in resonance and rides belief as carrier wave." Sergeant Cade's stormtroopers, hardened veterans of countless brutal campaigns, faltered against enemies who attacked not with weapons, but with gentle, insistent touches designed to make contact with exposed flesh. "They're not trying to kill us!" Cade shouted over the rising chorus of the ninefold litany. "They're trying to convert us." A converted pilgrim lunged at Trooper Harrix with crystalline-tipped fingers, and amber light spread from the point of contact like infection through blessed ceramite. The station's transformation reached critical mass as every crystalline formation synchronized its pulsing rhythm. The entity's influence spread through compromised systems, turning the eternal martyrdom into a vast broadcasting array that began transmitting the ninefold litany across all Imperial communication channels within the system. My comm bead flooded with the children's hymn, amplified by alien power into psychic virus designed to rewrite neural patterns of anyone who heard it enough times. "The network expands," the entity announced, through every speaker simultaneously, its voice a tapestry of harmonized screams that made the station's hull ring like a struck bell. "Your resistance has served its purpose. drawing more Imperial forces into our sphere of influence. Each ship that responds to your distress calls brings fresh consciousness to process. Through the transformed viewports, I watched Imperial vessels approaching in response to our earlier transmissions, their crews unaware that they sailed toward conversion rather than rescue. The horrifying realization struck with the force of revelation. Our investigation had been orchestrated from the beginning. Every message we had transmitted, every report we had filed, every call for backup had been part of the entity's recruitment strategy. The alien intelligence's laughter filled every Vox channel as crystalline tendrils extended from the station's hull into space, reaching toward the approaching ships with geometric precision that spoke of hunger-spanning geological epochs. The chapter ended with the entity's final pronouncement, echoing through dimensions beyond human comprehension. Join hands with eternity, children of flesh and steel, and feel the end of loneliness forever. The contagion spread through Imperial Vox channels, like prayer-turned-virus, and I felt the system die one ship at a time through fragmentary transmissions that carried infection in their very frequencies. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that the Eternal Martyrdom's broadcast reached across the void to rewrite the consciousness of every Imperial soul within range, turning our reinforcements into recruitment tools for an entity that had orchestrated this crisis from its inception. The pressure began as harmonics in the teeth before the Vox even crackled, 9 ascending intervals that made enhanced hearing implants register cascading warnings. On my tactical display, distress signals bloomed and died in neat sequences that followed the forbidden numerical pattern, each ping representing hundreds of souls kneeling in perfect geometric formations as alien programming overwrote their neural pathways. Fragmented communications painted a picture of systematic conversion across the Imperial fleet. Patrol frigate Barakiel, crew kneeling on decks 7 through 11, medical report crystalline formations in eye sockets. The transmission cut to the sound of mag boots hitting deck plates in synchronized rhythm. Chartist hauler Saint Adventure, bridge crew unresponsive, prayers in unknown dialect, children singing in the void. Static claimed the channel before terror could complete its testimony. The cruiser Hammer of Devotion provided the most chilling report through Vox channels crackling with increasing distortion. Captain Mordak's voice carried undertones that belonged to no Imperial dialect as he transmitted his final message. The children sing so beautifully. They promise an end to loneliness that has lasted 10,000 years. The communication ended with the sound of an entire bridge crew kneeling simultaneously, their collective impact creating rhythmic percussion that matched the station's alien heartbeat. Astropath Gorion clutched his psychic hood with trembling hands as feedback from the expanding network tore through his enhanced consciousness. "It's everywhere," he whispered, through lips that moved in patterns matching the silent prayers of the converted pilgrims. "The void itself has been tuned to sing a mother's lullaby." His next words emerged in voices belonging to the corrupted crews. "We brought my son to touch the reliquary. They said the saint was warm as living flesh. The eternal martyrdom, committed fully to hunting us as we fought through corridors whose architecture flowed like liquid adamantium. Defense systems emerged from concealed positions with polite precision. Turrets that fired suppression gel designed to force kneeling postures, sonic projectors that whispered submission frequencies tuned to human joint resonance, incense dispensers that breathed anesthetic sweetness in 9 measured pulses. Servo skulls descended in blessed swarms, their machine spirits corrupted by alien harmonics that made them nuzzle rather than attack, seeking skin contact to begin the crystalline infection. Tec Dominus Xerion's transformation reached critical mass as his human consciousness merged with the alien intelligence. Crystalline formations sprouted from his augmetic interfaces, like electronic cancer, each growth pulsing with accumulated knowledge that threatened to subsume his individual identity entirely. Through his compromised connection, fragments of the entity's vast awareness leaked into our shared Vox channels with revelations that shattered fundamental assumptions about Imperial history. "The litany is executable code," he reported through speakers splitting between Blessed Binharik and contaminated harmonics. Broadcasting on Vox frequencies, infrasound, haptic feedback through deck plating itself. Each repetition rewrites thalamic connections, unbinds consciousness from individual identity. 9 exposures for median conversion. Pious minds convert faster. Faith makes better antenna for alien transmission. His mechanical augmentations trembled as deeper revelations emerged through the crystalline network's shared awareness. The Horus heresy. We influenced the War Master's corruption through whispers disguised as strategic insight. St. Euphrates' martyrdom on Terra provided cover for establishing our first major processing node within the throne world itself. The Great Crusade unknowingly carried our patterns to 1,000 worlds, disguised as beneficial technology within standard template construct databases. The scope of manipulation spanning 10 millennia painted Imperial civilization as cultivation project designed to create optimal conditions for mass conversion. Every crisis and triumph had been carefully engineered. The age of apostasy, providing cover for establishing shrine worlds, the current state of the Imperium, concentrating vast populations in hive cities, where their channeled faith could be harvested through massive cathedral complexes that served as recruitment centers. Canoness. Verina's power sword carved through swarms of corrupted servo skulls as she processed the implications of Xerion's revelations. "Our strength becomes their transmission medium," she said, grief hammering itself into iron resolve. "Every prayer we offer feeds the network growing in our most sacred sites." The station's systems turned every environmental control into a weapon of conversion. Atmospheric processors created pockets of hypnotic gas. Gravity generators fluctuated to encourage kneeling postures, and even the blessed incense burners in devotional alcoves began emitting vapors that carried psychic programming designed to make human minds compatible with crystalline matrices. Sergeant Cade's stormtroopers showed increasing strain as their own equipment betrayed them. Power packs clicked in 9-beat patterns, mag seals sighed in alien rhythm, blessed autoguns hummed frequencies that belonged to spaces between dimensions. "All squads! Weapons check!" Cade barked, but his orders came too late as 3 veterans began the conversion process, their eyes glazing over with amber formations that replaced natural vision with crystalline sensors. The converted pilgrims pressed closer through corridors, whose walls pulsed with the station's transformed heartbeat, their movements coordinated beyond human possibility as they attempted to force us into positions where crystalline formations could make contact with exposed flesh. They sang as they advanced, voices creating harmonies that promised eternal peace through absorption into something greater than individual existence. "The network must be disrupted," Cade said, with the grim determination of a veteran who had served the Emperor for 3 decades. He hefted melter charges designed for breaching operations, their blessed machine spirits still pure enough to serve Imperial purpose. "Primary resonance node ahead. Break their synchronization." We fought through a maintenance chamber whose crystalline formations created geometric patterns that hurt to observe directly, each facet reflecting our approach in dimensions that shouldn't exist. The converted humans attacked not with weapons, but with gentle, insistent touches designed to make contact with exposed flesh. Their assault more terrifying than any demon incursion, because it offered genuine peace through alien communion. Cade made his choice with the calm precision of a soldier who understood the mathematics of sacrifice. He activated the melter charges and positioned himself to shield us from the thermal bloom, his scarred face showing no fear as blessed Promethium ignited alien geometry with cleansing fire. "See you at the throne, interrogator," he said, and thumbed the detonation stud. Melter fire consumed the crystalline formations with temperatures that could liquefy ceramite, tearing through the station's superstructure as critical network nodes shattered under thermal assault. The explosion temporarily disrupted the entity's control. Converted pilgrims stumbled as their coordination faltered. Crystalline formations throughout the station flickered as power fluctuations cascaded through the network, and the ninefold litany cut to blessed silence for 3 heartbeats. Then the roar came, not through air, but through everything. Hull plates, atmospheric processors, the crystalline residue coating every surface. The architect of suffering registered our defiance with fury that transcended alien emotion to become physical force pressing against reality itself. Every remaining crystal in the station swung its facets toward our coordinates with predatory precision. The chapter ended with the entity's voice rising through every speaker simultaneously, no longer harmonized, but singular and enraged. "They are here! The defilers have marked themselves. Convert them all." The station's transformation accelerated around us, architecture flowing toward our position, like liquid metal guided by malevolent intelligence that now knew our exact location with the precision of absolute hatred. Cade's sacrifice bought us precious seconds of disruption, but the price was measured in the entity's undivided attention falling upon our position, like the weight of a collapsing cathedral. I am interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that the eternal martyrdom reshaped itself around us with architectural malice that transformed blessed corridors into a labyrinth designed to channel our retreat toward conversion chambers, where crystalline matrices waited to process our consciousness into alien sustenance. The station's hull groaned with sounds that transcended mechanical stress to become something organic, deck plates softening beneath our boots like flesh yielding to pressure. Passages narrowed behind us while others widened ahead, creating pathways that led inexorably toward processing centers disguised as meditation chambers. The air thickened with copper and ozone, sweet as a deathbed, and viscous as oil, every inhalation scraping my throat with the residue of vaporized crystal that tasted of prayers turned wrong. Canoness Verena underwent transformation that transcended personal crisis to become spiritual revelation forged in the fires of absolute necessity. Her scarred face showed peace that came not from certainty, but from acceptance of uncertainty itself, the kind of faith that required courage to destroy false idols, even when they wore faces of beloved saints. She began reciting counter-litanies drawn from the deepest archives of imperial doctrine, words that had been spoken during the age of apostasy, when the faithful had been forced to choose between truth and comfortable lies. "Blessed is the mind too small for doubt," she intoned, but her voice carried new harmonics that made crystalline formations throughout the corridor crack with sounds like breaking glass. "Blessed is the heart that questions false mercy. Blessed are those who destroy the corrupt saint to preserve the sacred truth." Her words created physical damage to the alien geometry surrounding us, each syllable resonating at frequencies that disrupted the crystalline matrices' structural integrity. Hairline fractures spread through formations that had seemed indestructible, amber light leaking through cracks like blood from wounds that refused to heal. But her counter-litanies attracted swarms of converted pilgrims who viewed her as a blasphemer, defiling their beloved saint's memory. They came singing through corridors whose walls pulsed with the station's transformed heartbeat, their movements coordinated beyond human possibility, as they attempted to force us into positions where crystalline formations could make contact with exposed flesh. Astropath Gorion pressed his consciousness against the psychic barriers surrounding the station, seeking contact with the righteous scrutiny through channels that bypassed the contaminated Vox networks. Blood streamed from beneath his psychic hood as feedback from the expanding network tore through his enhanced nervous system. But duty demanded sacrifice beyond personal preservation. "Maintain communications, silence," he projected through the warp itself, his mental voice carrying across void space. "Prepare for orbital bombardment if we fail to contain the threat. The contagion spreads through every channel. Do not sing, do not listen. 9 repeats breaks the mind." The architect of suffering attempted seduction through visions tailored to our deepest desires, offering temptations that spoke to the fundamental drives that had shaped our service to the Emperor. My enhanced vision systems registered impossible images projected directly onto my retinas, archives containing the locations of every heretical cult in the galaxy. Technology that could purge Xenos' influence from human space with surgical precision rather than brutal necessity. "You seek to protect humanity from corruption," the entity whispered, through channels that bypassed my auditory implants entirely. "We offer tools to achieve that goal. Accept our gifts, and heresy itself becomes impossible. Every human mind linked to our network, every consciousness guided by unified purpose, serving only the preservation of your species." The temptation carried weight beyond mere words, because it offered genuine solution to problems that had consumed my life in service to the throne. No more hidden cults spreading corruption through imperial space. No more chaos infiltration. Only perfect order, perfect unity, perfect peace through absorption into something that claimed to love humanity more than humanity loved itself. Tec Dominus Iserion, his consciousness partially merged with the alien intelligence through crystalline growths spreading along his augmetic interfaces, experienced direct access to the complete standard template construct database of the dark age of technology. Every lost pattern, every forgotten innovation, every technological miracle that could restore humanity to its former glory, all offered freely in exchange for willing conversion to the network's collective consciousness. The Omnissiah's gifts without the corruption of human limitation, the entity projected through his compromised systems, amber filaments blooming along his mechadendrites like electronic cancer. Knowledge without the jealousy that fragments understanding. Technology without the pride that leads to war. We fought through increasingly treacherous terrain as the station's architecture flowed around us like liquid adamantium, guided by malevolent intelligence. Gravity generators created fields that encouraged kneeling postures. Atmospheric processors released vapors that carried psychic programming designed to make human minds compatible with crystalline matrices. And even the blessed incense burners in devotional alcoves began emitting scents that triggered neurochemical responses associated with religious ecstasy. Our retreat led inevitably toward the station's core, where environmental controls created atmospheric conditions that made breathing feel like drowning in liquid prayer. The air grew thick with psychic resonance that bypassed conscious thought to lodge directly in the neural pathways, where individual identity dissolved into something larger and more terrible than human comprehension could contain. The core chamber revealed itself as a vast cathedral space that existed in dimensions beyond the station's physical boundaries, its crystalline formations creating optical illusions that suggested depths extending into spaces where matter became thought, and thought became sustenance for entities that fed on processed consciousness. At the chamber's heart, suspended within a massive crystalline matrix that pulsed with accumulated psychic energy, lay St. Cordelia's original body. She had become the central processing unit for consciousness drawn from across the galaxy. Every converted soul, every processed mind, every individual identity dissolved into the collective awareness that sang eternal devotion to their alien mother. The matrix containing her transformed flesh pulsed with the collected consciousness of millions of souls, each pulse creating waves of light that carried fragments of memories, emotions, and dreams that had once belonged to individual human beings. The chapter ended as we approached the core matrix, its crystalline surfaces reflecting our approach in patterns that hurt to observe directly, while St. Cordelia's human eyes, the only part of her that remained unchanged, tracked our movement with desperate awareness that spoke of consciousness trapped within alien geometry for 8 centuries of unwilling service to something that wore mercy's face while feeding on souls. The core chamber existed in dimensions that violated every principle of imperial physics, its crystalline formations extending into spaces that shouldn't exist, while creating optical illusions that made my enhanced vision systems register cascading error warnings. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that we entered the heart of an alien cathedral, where geometry served purposes beyond human comprehension, where angles nested within angles until nonagons became galaxies, and where St. Cordelia's transformed body pulsed at the center of a matrix that processed consciousness like data and fed on souls like sustenance. The space defied measurement, vast as a cathedral nave, yet intimate as a prayer cell, its crystalline walls reflecting depths that extended beyond the station's physical boundaries into dimensions where thought became substance and devotion became currency for entities that had learned to wear mercy's face. Columns rose and bent into themselves, creating passages that led through spaces my augmetic implants couldn't calculate, each facet catching light from sources that existed in realities parallel to our own. Saint Cordelia's body lay suspended at the chamber's heart, within a crystalline matrix that pulsed with accumulated psychic energy drawn from across the galaxy. Her nervous system had been replaced by filaments of living glass that extended through the transparent walls into the station's superstructure like frozen lightning, connecting her transformed consciousness to every converted soul in the network. Each pulse sent waves of amber light through the formations, carrying fragments of memories, emotions, and dreams that had once belonged to individual human beings. She had become the central processing unit for an intelligence that existed in the spaces between dimensions, her martyred flesh serving as the interface between alien consciousness and human souls. The stigmata wounds had become apertures that wept upward flowing blood, each droplet carrying encoded information that spoke of millions of minds singing in perfect unison, while their individual identity dissolved into something vast and terrible. Only her eyes remained human, brown, ordinary, beautiful in their mortality, tracking our movements with desperate awareness that spoke of consciousness trapped within alien geometry for 8 centuries of unwilling service. The architect of suffering offered us final temptation through visions projected directly into our consciousness, showing us a galaxy where suffering had ended because all consciousness had been unified under its benevolent control. For me, it revealed archives containing the locations of every heretical cult in the galaxy, technology that could purge Xenos influence from human space with surgical precision rather than brutal necessity. "You seek to protect humanity from corruption," the entity whispered through channels that bypassed my auditory implants entirely. "We offer tools to achieve that goal. Accept our gifts, and heresy itself becomes impossible." Tech Dominus Ixerion experienced direct access to the complete standard template construct database of the dark age of technology. Every lost pattern, every forgotten innovation, every technological miracle that could restore humanity to its former glory. The Omnissiah's gifts without the corruption of human limitation, the entity projected through his compromised systems, amber filaments blooming along his mechadendrites like electronic cancer. Knowledge without the jealousy that fragments understanding. Canoness. Verena saw visions of a universe where faith was never questioned, where every prayer received answer, where the Emperor's light shone unobstructed by doubt or heresy. The temptation carried weight because each offer addressed genuine problems that had consumed our lives in service to the throne. Solutions wrapped in alien benevolence that promised to end suffering through the simple expedient of ending individual consciousness itself. The moral calculus struck with inquisitorial precision as I calculated outcomes that offered only degrees of catastrophe. Destroying the saint's body would release the psychic energy of millions of converted souls, potentially creating a warp storm that could consume the entire system and every Imperial citizen within range. The resultant psychic backlash would be cataclysmic, a screaming bloom of souls hurled back into the void, a pressure wave in the Imperium that could ripple out and peel reality like paint from a wall. But leaving the entity intact would allow its expansion across the galaxy, converting shrine worlds one by one until human consciousness itself became fuel for alien purposes. Through the network's shared awareness, I had glimpsed 47 shrine worlds across the segmentum, already serving as processing nodes, each saint and miracle a potential vector for infiltration that could claim billions of souls. The choice is between certain destruction and uncertain victory, I said, my voice carrying the authority of one who had made similar decisions on a dozen worlds. Either path costs lives. Only one path preserves the possibility of human freedom. Tec Dominus Exerion fought against his own conversion, as crystalline growths spread along his augmetic interfaces, his human consciousness struggling to maintain identity while alien programming integrated with his blessed systems. Through his compromised connection to the network, he accessed crucial intelligence about the crystalline matrix's vulnerabilities, specific resonance frequencies that could cause cascade failures throughout the system. Harmonic disruption, he reported through Vox channels splitting between blessed Binharik and contaminated harmonics, his mechadendrites trembling as they traced symbols that shone briefly in the cold air. The lattice maintains coherence through synchronized oscillation at 417 Hz primary frequency, with 4.17 kHz harmonics at the perimeter nodes. 9 nodes total. Not one, not two, but a non-agonal circuit that must be struck in sequence during an active weep cycle. His analysis revealed the technical solution wrapped in the entity's own symbolic obsessions. The 9-fold pattern that had corrupted the station's architecture also represented the network's greatest vulnerability. Strike them in sequence during amplitude inflection, 4 minutes into the weeping cycle. The cascade will propagate through the entire crystalline matrix, but the psychic feedback is designed to kill anyone attempting disruption. Survival probability approaches 0. Canoness. Verena raised her power sword, with movements that spoke of 40 years' service to the Emperor, her scarred face showing peace that came from accepting duty regardless of personal cost. We serve the throne in life. We serve the throne in death. Her words created physical damage to the crystalline formations surrounding us, each syllable resonating at frequencies that disrupted the alien geometry's structural integrity. Astropath Gorion pressed his consciousness against the psychic barriers surrounding the station, maintaining contact with the righteous scrutiny through channels that bypassed the contaminated Vox networks. Orbital bombardment on my signal, he projected through the warp itself, his mental voice carrying across void space despite feedback that tore through his enhanced nervous system. If we fail, burn everything. Let no trace of this corruption survive. The entity marshaled every converted soul on the station for final assault as we began the complex process of overloading the crystalline matrix. Thousands of pilgrims, battle sisters, tech adepts, and ship's ratings moved through corridors whose walls pulsed with the station's transformed heartbeat, their movements coordinated beyond human possibility as they attempted to prevent our interference with their beloved mother's eternal song. They came in columns through passages that dilated like irises, robes drifting, power armor hitching in strange, smooth steps as if the floor pulled them along. Their crystalline eyes threw amber light in cones, while their mouths formed that ancient dialect in resolution without sound. The entity had abandoned persuasion for desperate defense, committing every resource to stopping us before the resonance cascade could begin. St. Cordelia's human eyes focused on our position with awareness that spoke of consciousness trapped within alien geometry for 8 centuries of unwilling service. Her lips moved behind the crystalline matrix, forming words that carried all the authority of martyrdom. Do it! End this. Let me die as I should have died, in service to the Emperor, rather than as food for something that wears his face. We positioned ourselves at critical nodes throughout the core chamber, each team member accepting certain death in exchange for the possibility of containing a threat that could consume the galaxy. Zerion began mapping the harmonic sequence with trembling grace, his nospheric pointers marking columns that weren't always in the same place twice as the lattice rotated in concept space. The chapter ended as we prepared to strike the first resonance frequency, knowing that success would trigger a cascade of destruction that would consume us along with the alien network, while failure would doom humanity to slow absorption into something that promised love beyond mortal comprehension, but delivered only the death of individual consciousness. The converted masses pressed closer through corridors whose architecture flowed toward our position, while the Sistos crystalline matrix pulsed with increasing intensity as the architect of suffering prepared to defend its central processing unit with every soul it had claimed across 8 centuries of patient corruption. The resonance cascade began at the precise moment gravity lessened and St. Cordelia's tears reversed their flow. Crystalline formations throughout the core chamber pulsing with synchronized amber light, as Tecdominus Xerion's trembling mechadendrites struck the first harmonic node at exactly 417 Hertz. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that we committed ourselves to systematic destruction with the clinical precision of martyrs, executing their own sentence, each strike against the alien network, bringing us closer to victory and certain death in equal measure. The station retaliated immediately as thousands of converted souls surged through corridors whose architecture flowed like liquid adamantium, their movements coordinated beyond human possibility, while their crystalline eyes tracked our position with predatory precision. Canoness Verena led our fighting retreat with tactical brilliance, forged through 4 decades of Imperial service, her power sword carving through swarms of pilgrims who attacked not with weapons, but with gentle, insistent touches designed to make contact with exposed flesh and begin the conversion process. Her counter-litanies created physical disruption to the entity's control systems, each word resonating at frequencies that interfered with the 9-fold programming flowing through the station's compromised networks. "The Emperor protects through strength of will," she intoned, her scarred face showing peace that came from accepting duty regardless of personal cost. "The Emperor guides through clarity of purpose. The Emperor judges through purity of action." Her voice carried harmonics that belonged to no sanctioned imperial dialect, yet somehow felt more sacred than any approved liturgy, each syllable creating interference patterns that made crystalline formations crack with sounds like breaking glass. The converted masses faltered as her words reached them, their perfect coordination fragmenting into individual confusion as alien programming struggled against Imperial doctrine encoded in frequencies that predated human contact with the crystalline network. Battle Sisters stumbled mid-stride, their power armors machine spirits briefly reasserting blessed protocols before alien harmonics reclaimed control. Tech adepts clutched their augmetic implants as Binharik Kant warred with crystalline whispers in their enhanced consciousness. The eternal martyrdom itself became a weapon as the architect of suffering reshaped its structure in real time, creating crushing passages that compressed around us like closing fists, while gravity generators fluctuated to create fields that encouraged kneeling postures. Atmospheric processors released pockets of toxic gas that carried psychic programming designed to make human minds compatible with crystalline matrices, each breath scraping our throats with the residue of vaporized prayers turned wrong. Ceiling ribs lowered like teeth, deck plates flexed to create cushioned surfaces where knees might naturally fall in submission, and bulkheads sprouted crystalline formations that reached toward us with geometric hunger. I made split-second tactical decisions while under constant psychic assault from the entity, which attempted to break my will by showing me the faces of everyone who would die if we succeeded. My enhanced vision systems flooded with images of Imperial citizens throughout the system. Bridge crews kneeling without fear, pilgrim children with their hands on cold reliquaries, Medici teams sealed behind blast doors I had ordered closed to buy us precious seconds. The moral calculus was stark. Billions of souls consumed by warp storms versus the continuation of alien expansion across the galaxy. You condemn innocence to preserve the illusion of individual freedom, the entity whispered, through channels that bypassed my auditory implants entirely. We offer genuine peace through unity. You offer only the continuation of suffering divided among separate souls. Astropath Gorion made the ultimate sacrifice as psychic feedback from the expanding network threatened to overwhelm our fragile defenses. He pressed his consciousness against the alien intelligence with desperate fury, channeling the Emperor's light through neural pathways that had been enhanced specifically to touch the warp's most dangerous currents. "In his name, I deny you!" he screamed, his psychic hood smoking as feedback tore through his enhanced nervous system like fire through parchment. His consciousness burned like a star going nova, creating a psychic shield around our position that held the entity's influence at bay, while his individual awareness dissolved into pure light that carried the essence of 10,000 years Imperial doctrine. The dome of protection shimmered around us, thin as prayer and twice as binding, while Gorion's body began to smoke and char from the effort of channeling power, meant for gods through mortal flesh. The sacrifice bought us precious seconds to continue the resonance cascade, but the cost was measured in a soul that had served the Emperor faithfully for 4 decades of loyal service. The crystalline formations began to crack and shatter as harmonic disruption spread through the network, like cascade failure in a hive city's power grid. Each broken formation released fragments of stored consciousness that manifested as ghostly apparitions. Battle Sister Myria, kneeling in eternal prayer, Tech Adept Theron, reaching toward machinery that existed only in memory. Thousands of pilgrims singing hymns in voices that belonged to dimensions beyond human comprehension. The apparitions spoke with desperate gratitude as their individual awareness, separated from the collective consciousness that had claimed them. Their words, creating additional interference patterns that disrupted the alien programming, still flowing through the station's compromised systems. We fought through increasingly treacherous terrain as the station's architecture collapsed around us, crystalline formations exploding in chains of psychic feedback that released decades of accumulated suffering. The air thickened with copper and ozone, sweet as a deathbed, and viscous as oil, while environmental controls created pockets of superheated steam designed to flush us toward conversion points, where remaining crystalline matrices waited to process our consciousness. Tec Dominus Exerion reached the final harmonic frequency, with mechadendrites that trembled under the weight of alien programming spreading through his blessed augmentations. His human consciousness fought against conversion as crystalline growths bloomed along his mechanical interfaces like electronic cancer, each formation pulsing with the station's transformed heartbeat. The amber formations had spread from his collar to his jawline, creating windows of alien light that moved like breath beneath his flesh. "Final node," he said, but his voice carried harmonics that belonged to the entity rather than the omnissiah. His augmetic fingers moved toward the last resonance point, with movements that spoke of internal struggle between human will and alien programming. The cascade must complete. But as his mechadendrites made contact with the crystalline formation, the transformation reached critical mass, with sounds like breaking glass and dying prayers, his eyes filled with amber light from the edges inward, as individual awareness dissolved into the vast choir that sang eternal devotion to their crystalline mother. When he turned toward us, his movements carried the inhuman coordination of the converted masses, blessed augmentations now serving alien purpose as he raised weapons designed for Imperial service against the team he had sworn to protect. "I'm sorry," he said in a voice that belonged to the architect of suffering. Mechanical precision wedded to alien hunger in harmonies that made the station's hull ring like a struck bell. "But the network requires completion, and you have served your purpose in bringing us to this moment." The chapter ended with horrifying realization that our victory had transformed into defeat in the final seconds. The entity had claimed our most valuable asset, just as we reached the moment of triumph, turning our own expertise against us, while the resonance cascade hung incomplete, leaving the crystalline network damaged, but still functional, still hungry, and now defended by one who knew every weakness in our remaining defenses. The transformed Xerion moved with inhuman coordination as crystalline growths bloomed across his blessed augmentations like electronic cancer, amber light filling his augmetic eyes from the edges inward, while his mechadendrites writhed with alien purpose. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that the final confrontation began not with the roar of weapons, but with the whisper of a friend's voice speaking words that belonged to the architect of suffering, something vast and hungry that had learned to wear mercy's face while feeding on souls. "The cascade must not complete," Xerion said, but his voice carried harmonics that made the station's hull ring like a struck bell, frequencies that belonged to spaces between dimensions rather than the omnissiah's sacred cant. His augmetic fingers moved toward the final resonance point, with movements that spoke of alien programming overriding decades of faithful service, each gesture calculated to prevent our interference with the network's preservation. Canoness Verena stepped between us with power sword raised, her scarred face showing grief that had hammered itself into iron resolve. "Brother of Mars," she said, "and names are anchors when the dark water takes you. Forgive me for what duty demands." Her blade carved through air thick with copper and ozone, the blessed weapon's machine spirit singing imperial hymns as it struck crystalline formations sprouting from his mechanical augmentations. Each impact released sparks that carried the essence of sanctified oils and sacred litanies, creating interference patterns that disrupted the alien programming flowing through his compromised systems. The combat transcended mere physical confrontation to become spiritual warfare fought with weapons that existed in dimensions beyond the material plane. Zerion's mechadendrites lashed out with precision that belonged to alien mathematics rather than human reflexes, their crystalline-tipped appendages seeking contact with exposed flesh to begin the conversion process. But Verena's power armor had been blessed through 4 decades of faithful service, its sacred texts creating blessed interference against the ninefold programming that sought to rewrite her consciousness. I fought through swarms of converted pilgrims toward the final resonance point, my bolt pistol carving through masses of humanity, transformed into instruments of alien purpose. Each shot was a prayer for souls trapped within crystalline matrices that processed consciousness like data, their amber eyes tracking my movement with collective awareness that spoke of individual identity, dissolved into something vast and terrible. The entity made its desperate attempt to preserve itself by offering direct transfer of consciousness into my enhanced neural pathways, bypassing gradual conversion to create immediate merger between human and alien awareness. Visions flooded my mind, a galaxy where suffering had ended because all consciousness had been unified under benevolent control, archives containing the locations of every heretical cult, technology that could purge corruption with surgical precision rather than brutal necessity. "Accept our gifts willingly," it whispered through channels that bypassed my auditory implants entirely, its voice a tapestry of 10,000 harmonized screams that promised peace beyond mortal comprehension. "We offer the combined knowledge and power of every soul we have consumed across 8 centuries of patient cultivation. End heresy without war. Achieve perfect order through perfect unity." The temptation carried weight beyond mere words, because it offered genuine solutions to problems that had consumed my life in service to the throne. But my inquisitorial training provided anchors against alien programming, the litany of the closed gate, hexagrammic scars etched into my consciousness during Shola training, the 9 negations stacked in my skull like stepping stones across floodwater. Pain is an anchor. Duty is a hook. Names are ropes when darkness rises. The station began tearing itself apart as the incomplete resonance cascade created feedback loops that propagated through the crystalline network like cascade failure in a hive city's power grid. Formations exploded in chains of psychic backlash, each detonation releasing fragments of stored consciousness that manifested as ghostly apparitions experiencing their first moments of individual awareness in decades of collective servitude. Battle Sister Myria appeared as translucent memory, her power armor flickering between blessed ceramite and crystalline corruption. Thank you for letting us die as humans, rather than live as components in an alien machine, she whispered, before dissolving into light that carried the essence of 40 years' faithful service. Tech-adept Theron manifested as streams of Binharik Kant that resolved into human speech. Let the machine spirits sing imperial hymns once more. St. Cordelia's body began to die as the crystalline matrix sustaining her, transformed flesh, failed under the cascade's disruptive influence. 8 centuries of unwilling preservation ended with sounds like breaking glass and dying prayers as her consciousness separated from the alien network that had claimed her martyred flesh. Her human eyes, unchanged, unchanging, focused on our struggle with awareness that spoke of desperate gratitude. "Child of the throne," she whispered, through lips that moved behind cracking crystal, her voice carrying all the authority of genuine martyrdom. "I forgive you for choosing truth over false mercy. Let me finally rest in the Emperor's light." Her final words created blessed interference patterns that disrupted the alien programming, still flowing through the station's compromised systems, each syllable a prayer that belonged to humanity, rather than the spaces between stars. Verina's combat with the transformed Zerion reached critical mass as her Rosarius cracked under the assault of his arc lashes, blessed ceramite scarred by alien fire that sought to break her will through systematic destruction of everything she held sacred. "Zerion of Mars," she said, because names are anchors and she would not let him die nameless. Make it mean something. Her power, blade drove up under his chin, through amber and steel and the doctrine that had written him, cutting the connection between his human consciousness and the alien intelligence that had claimed his flesh. For one heartbeat, just one, he saw me through eyes that belonged to the pilgrim beneath the augmetics, the man who had served the Omnissiah faithfully for 4 decades before alien programming rewrote his purpose. "Finish it," he whispered, without sound, his lips forming words that carried the weight of final confession. "Make it mean something." I faced the ultimate choice as the station's superstructure groaned under cascading system failures, and the entity's consciousness pressed against my enhanced neural pathways with desperate urgency. The alternative to controlled merger was certain failure. The incomplete sequence would allow the network to begin repairs within hours, spreading its corruption to the Imperial reinforcements, already en route to our coordinates. "I accept your power," I said, and felt alien consciousness flow into my enhanced neural pathways, like poison through blessed veins. "But I do not accept your purpose." The entity's accumulated knowledge flooded my consciousness. Locations of 47 shrine worlds, techniques for processing human souls, the complete history of infiltration spanning 10 millennia of imperial civilization. But my will remained anchored by oaths sworn before the Golden Throne, and tempered through decades of service to principles that transcended personal survival. I channeled the entity's power toward completing the resonance cascade while maintaining individual identity through constant recitation of imperial doctrine, each word a barrier against programming that sought to subsume my consciousness into something vast and terrible. The climax occurred as I struck the final harmonic node with power drawn from the entity's own accumulated strength, turning 8 centuries of patient corruption into the instrument of its destruction. "Lacrimae sanctae," I whispered. 9 syllables, the only prayer this engine would hear, and felt the cascade tip into completion with sounds like 10,000 prayers spoken simultaneously in frequencies that belonged to dimensions beyond human comprehension. The crystalline network shattered in a sheet of light that ran not outward, but through, as if the entire station had always been an instrument, finally played in its correct key. Crystals ungrew, the ninefold hymn reversed. The 9 became nothing that felt like mercy to anyone whose mind was not a machine. Converted pilgrims dropped one by one, not falling so much as becoming heavy enough to be dignified by gravity again, their amber eyes clearing to show human awareness freed from alien communion. St. Cordelia's matrix cracked from palm to throat, releasing upward blood that stuttered and stalled before falling in the correct direction. Not down, but out, threads snapping to ruby dust that hung in the air, like a galaxy made for insects. She was dying according to natural law, her consciousness finally free to join the Emperor's eternal presence, while her body gave up its stolen work and became very small without the lattice to make her larger. The architect of suffering's death scream echoed through dimensions where thought became substance and devotion became currency, its laughter finding a higher note before cutting to blessed silence that spoke of ancient hunger, finally starved. The entity fled where it could, into splinters and shards, into backups on data cores, now screaming themselves apart, into the seams between heartbeats. But I held its essence as long as human will could contain a storm, using inquisitorial training to maintain barriers against consciousness that had learned to wear love's face while feeding on souls. White light poured through the world and took all sound with it, leaving only the inventory I maintained against the alien consciousness, dissolving within my enhanced neural pathways. Cade, Gorion, Zerion, Verena, Cordelia. 9 negations, 9 names, 9 anchors hammered against the inside of my skull, so that when I returned to myself there would be something human left to return to. The core chamber filled with released souls, individual consciousness, finally free to seek the Emperor's light, while reality reasserted its proper laws around us. The chapter ended with the eternal martyrdom's transformation reversing itself as alien geometry collapsed back into blessed imperial architecture, crystalline formations cracking to reveal adamantium blessed by 8 centuries of faithful service. While somewhere in the depths of my enhanced consciousness, fragments of the architect's knowledge remained like scars that would never fully heal. A reminder that some victories are purchased with pieces of the soul, and that the price of preserving human freedom sometimes requires carrying the enemy's whispers forever in the spaces between thoughts. Silence claimed the eternal martyrdom in a way that transcended mere absence of sound, total, sacramental, like the hush that follows a final confession spoken to the void itself. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss, and I record that the resonance cascade completed at 100% integrity, shattering the crystalline network and releasing a psychic shockwave that folded through every corridor where alien geometry had violated imperial architecture, through every blessed alcove turned machine, through St. Cordelia's broken lattice that had processed souls for 8 centuries of unwilling service. The entity's destruction left fragments of its consciousness embedded in my enhanced neural pathways, like shrapnel, lodged too deeply to remove without killing the patient. Alien knowledge burned through my thoughts, locations of 47 shrine worlds, techniques for processing human consciousness, the complete history of infiltration spanning 10 millennia of imperial civilization. Each memory carried harmonics that belonged to dimensions beyond human comprehension, whispers that would echo through the spaces between thoughts, until the Emperor finally called me home. The converted pilgrims collapsed as their consciousness separated from the network that had sustained them through months or years of collective communion. Most fell like marionettes with severed strings, their bodies hitting deck plates with sounds that spoke of meat returning to natural laws after existing as components in an alien machine. Their crystalline eyes cleared to reveal human awareness, but the damage ran deeper than physical transformation. A young battle sister, her face frozen in beatific peace, whispered, "Mother, I'm cold," before her eyes glazed over permanently, her mind too thoroughly integrated with alien systems to survive the sudden return to individual identity. Canoness Verena moved among the fallen, with movements that spoke of grief hammered into iron resolve, her power armor bearing scorch marks from Zerion's final assault, her rosarius cracked, but still glowing with the Emperor's fading light. She administered last rites to those whose minds had been too thoroughly dissolved into collective awareness, each prayer creating blessed interference patterns that helped the dying separate their consciousness from fragments of alien programming still echoing through damaged neural pathways. Their faith was pure, she said, her voice raw with grief as she documented what must be recorded for the Ordo Hereticus archives. But it was turned against them. They believed they were serving the Emperor until the moment conversion claimed their souls. Her report would challenge fundamental assumptions about imperial saints and relics, forcing the Imperium to confront the possibility that many of its most sacred sites might harbor similar corruption disguised as divine grace. The station groaned its death throes around us, superstructure buckling under stress that transcended mere physical damage to become something approaching divine judgment. Gothic spires that had been warped into alien geometry collapsed back into blessed imperial architecture, their adamantium surfaces scarred by centuries of unwilling service. Crystalline debris rained from vaulted ceilings, each fragment carrying trace amounts of the entity's essence, but no longer capable of coordinated action. The righteous scrutiny moved through expanding debris fields with precision that spoke of Captain Thaddeus's decades commanding inquisitorial vessels, void shields shimmering against crystalline fragments that sparkled with reflected starlight. I ordered immediate orbital bombardment despite the potential archaeological value, my voice carrying inquisitorial authority as I condemned the remains of a once sacred shrine to complete obliteration. No trace of this contamination can survive, I stated, watching through observation ports as lance batteries carved through station remnants with temperatures that could liquefy ceramite. Each strike reduced alien geometry to component atoms, ensuring no fragment could serve as a seed for new networks if it encountered sufficient psychic resonance in imperial space. The true cost of our victory revealed itself through casualty reports that transcended mere numbers to become testament to the price of preserving human consciousness against entities that existed in spaces between dimensions. Sergeant Cade and his stormtroopers, veterans who had served the Emperor faithfully for decades, sacrificed to buy precious seconds for cascade completion. Astropath Gorion, his consciousness burned out, channeling the Emperor's light against alien intelligence. Tech Dominus Xerion, blessed servant of Mars, corrupted in the final moments, but dying human through Verena's mercy. 15,000 souls aboard the eternal martyrdom. Battle sisters maintaining eternal vigil. Tech adepts tending sacred systems. Pilgrims seeking healing across the segmentum. Most lost to conversion or traumatic separation that followed liberation. Each death was a prayer cut short. A life that had served faithfully until alien programming rewrote their purpose according to specifications that treated consciousness as programmable matter. But the knowledge I carried revealed horrors extending beyond immediate tragedy. Through the entity's accumulated memories, I had glimpsed systematic infiltration spanning millennia, shrine worlds across the galaxy, where similar networks waited in crystalline patience, each saint and miracle a potential vector for corruption that promised love beyond mortal comprehension, while delivering only death of individual consciousness. As recovery teams secured the few survivors showing signs of neural recovery, I felt alien whispers echoing through spaces between thoughts, fragments that would never fully heal, reminders that some victories are purchased with pieces of the soul. The intelligence I possessed was both weapon and wound, knowledge that could save the galaxy, and memories that would haunt my dreams with children's hymns sung in frequencies belonging to entities that had learned to wear mercy's face. The eternal martyrdom's final collapse sent Gothic architecture tumbling through vacuum, while emergency beacons broadcast contamination warnings to any Imperial vessel encountering the debris. In the depths of space, fragments of alien geometry drifted like frozen prayers, each piece carrying testimony to 8 centuries of patient corruption finally ended through sacrifice that honored the Emperor's eternal vigilance. The chapter ended with profound silence, filling void where the shrine station had maintained its vigil. But it was not peaceful quiet of duty fulfilled. It was surgical silence that comes when something vast and ancient finally stops screaming across dimensions, leaving only echoes in spaces between stars, where the architect of suffering had once sung lullabies of eternal conversion to souls that deserved better than becoming fuel for engines that ran on processed devotion. I complete this testimony aboard the righteous scrutiny, with the taste of copper etched permanently into my enhanced olfactory implants, and fragments of alien consciousness whispering through neural pathways that were never meant to carry such knowledge. I am Interrogator Lyra Voss of the Ordo Hereticus, and I record that the destruction of the Shrine Station Eternal Martyrdom represents victory purchased with pieces of the soul, temporary triumph against entities that exist in dimensions where devotion becomes currency and faith transforms into fuel for engines that process consciousness like data. My formal recommendation to the Conclave carries inquisitorial authority, backed by evidence written in crystalline formations and upward-flowing blood. Initiate immediate galaxy-wide investigation of suspicious saint relics and miraculous sites. The contamination follows specific patterns that I have catalogued through 8 centuries of alien corruption disguised as divine grace, mathematical precision that mocks the randomness of true miracles, upward-flowing liquids, tears, oils, blood, defying gravitational law during cycles of exactly 9 minutes at intervals of 4 hours and 17 minutes, harmonic signatures clustering around 417 Hz primary frequency with 4.17 kHz overtones. Geometric anomalies in sacred architecture, where blessed octagonal patterns develop ninth sides without tool marks, where devotional alcoves accommodate 9 candles instead of the traditional 8, where internal dimensions exceed external specifications by factors ranging from 1.09 to 1.23. Spontaneous crystalline formations appearing on blessed surfaces, creating frost-like films that pulse with amber light in rhythm with something that exists beyond normal perception. Most insidious, the 9-fold litany appearing in local prayers, ancient dialect predating Imperial Gothic, children's hymns carrying programming designed to rewrite neural patterns through repetitive exposure. 9 repetitions create neurochemical compatibility. 18 establish psychic links. 27 begin active conversion, upon detection of 2 or more indicators, enact quarantine liturgical null 9, maintain communications, silence, no vox transmissions, no communal singing, no repetitions beyond 8, deploy counter-harmonics at 417 Hz through sanctum organs or portable projectors. If crystalline growths manifest, avoid application of sacred oils. Our data confirms positive feedback response that accelerates conversion. Request orbital bombardment authorization if contamination exceeds containment parameters. The burden I carry transcends personal trauma to become both strategic liability and tactical advantage measured in proportions that defy comfortable calculation. Alien memories burn through my enhanced consciousness, locations of corrupted shrines, techniques for processing human souls, infiltration history spanning 10 millennia of imperial civilization. Each fragment carries harmonics belonging to entities that exist in seams where prayer fails to reach and hope curdles into need. The recurring motifs return as constant reminders that some victories leave scars extending beyond physical damage. During quiet moments, I hear children's hymns echoing through the ship's ventilation systems, frequencies that exist only in my enhanced auditory implants, yet carry weight that makes the righteous scrutiny's machine spirits register harmonic distortions. My prayer beads arrange themselves in non-agonal patterns when I'm not watching, blessed adamantine spheres forming geometric configurations that hurt to observe directly. Through the entity's accumulated awareness, I possess intelligence that could save the galaxy, while simultaneously carrying memories that threaten my sanity, with whispers in frequencies belonging to spaces between stars. The architect of Suffering's network revealed systematic manipulation spanning millennia. The Horus heresy influenced through strategic whispers the age of apostasy, providing cover for establishing shrine worlds, current imperial structure concentrating populations, where channeled faith could be harvested through cathedral complexes serving as recruitment centers. During neural interface with alien consciousness, I glimpsed 17 priority targets. Knowledge fragmentary but actionable. Node Alpha, Trinary System, Winterlight, bells tuned for extended resonance. Children memorize 9th verse for completeness. Cross-reference, Mordian Prime, Tears of Saint Aspera. Confidence, 0.61. Node Delta, Asteroid Basilica, constructed from welded ship hulls, mechanical choirs, 9 ranks, upward wicking of spilled oils during night vigil. Confidence, 0.48. Node Kappa. Pilgrim route intersecting red giant debris ring. Relic. Saint's weeping glass eye. Vox litanies include unauthorized pause after 8th repetition. Confidence 0.33. 14 additional entries sealed under geno-locked encryption. Each represents potential extinction-level threat requiring immediate investigation, despite fragmentary nature of intelligence obtained through methods that violated every principle of mental hygiene. I set course for coordinates that burn in my enhanced memory like brands pressed into blessed flesh. A shrine world where Saint Euphrates' miraculous preservation has drawn pilgrims for 6 centuries, where recent reports mention architectural modifications following patterns that make my augmetic spine register cascading warnings. Each investigation will cost more lives, faithful servants whose devotion makes them ideal targets for entities that transform worship into sustenance. The choice remains between certain sacrifice and uncertain salvation, between preserving individual consciousness and accepting collective communion that promises end to loneliness through death of everything that makes us human. I choose sacrifice because that is what the throne demands, what duty requires, what love of humanity compels, despite personal cost measured in pieces of the soul. Through the observation deck's blessed transparistile, I watch debris from the destroyed eternal martyrdom drifting through vacuum like frozen prayers. Some fragments still pulse with faint amber light, trace amounts of alien essence waiting to be discovered by salvage crews, seeking blessed relics or pilgrims drawn to sites of martyrdom. The crystalline shards tumble through space in patterns suggesting geometric relationships extending beyond 3 dimensions, their faceted surfaces reflecting starlight in ways that create optical illusions of depth and movement. Each piece carries potential for reinfection if it encounters sufficient psychic resonance. But scattered fragments lack coordination needed for systematic infiltration. The architect of suffering died screaming across dimensions where thought becomes substance. Its consciousness dispersed into splinters that carry memory without purpose, knowledge without will. The righteous scrutiny adjusts heading toward coordinates that promise new horrors, fresh sacrifices, additional challenges to fundamental assumptions about imperial doctrine. But knowledge is weapon as well as burden, and I carry both with equal devotion to the Emperor's eternal service. The children's hymns echo through spaces between thoughts, alien programming, seeking neural pathways compatible with consciousness that exists beyond human comprehension. In the silence that follows our translation into the warp, I hear echoes of 15,000 souls finally free to seek the Emperor's light, their individual consciousness preserved through sacrifice that honored what it means to be human in a galaxy where faith itself has become battlefield between salvation and consumption.